And it's about money. We're talking about money today. And if you're like 72% of the people, according to an Alliance study, you should be worried about running out of money. If you're not worried about running out of money, that's awesome. But 72% of the people are worried about running out of money. And I believe that there's so much going on right now. I'm old, and I've been around a long time. I'm old enough that I can remember Dungeness crab at $2 a pound. Crab, shelled out. You could buy an entire crab for $1. Now that's been over 50 years ago, but what it means today is crab is going for $74 a pound. 74. King salmon for 57. Think about what cherries cost. Think about what we're seeing in terms of inflation. It's not going away. It's not just eggs. It's not just bird flu. It's inflation. Inflation is here. The Fed is ready to lower interest rates and say that inflation has gone away. But think about it. Have you been to a restaurant? Notice the price, and the prices have increased? You know, the fact is, we're living in an inflationary period of time. And it may not show up in the consumer price index, but if you do any grocery shopping, you know we have inflation. And you know that it's not going down. Grocery prices are not going down. Consuming prices are not going down. They're going up. And in inflationary times, prices go up like a rocket. They come down like a feather. If we're going to see a cutback in prices, it just doesn't seem to be in the cards. So what do you do? You know, the reality is 55% of people are putting their money into what are considered less risky assets. They're buying bonds. They're buying annuities. They're looking at this as having money locked away and getting a good return. And it is a good return today. You could have gotten a good return 15 years ago and been shocked. Instead of paying $33 for a pound of crab, paying $74. Locking up that 7% on your assets back then meant today that would be worth half as much. You would have half as much money as you need. Now there's something going on because it's a question of return versus volatility. In order to see your assets grow more, it's simply a matter that you have to take more risk with what you have. Sorry. 55% of people want less risky assets. That means they're going to have less return. That means they have a real quality of life issue. People are becoming their own worst enemy. If you're going to have an adequate time, you're going to have to focus on better returns, not worse returns. You're going to have to look at growing your money, not locking it down. Growing your money means more volatility. There's no way about it. You know that. That goes without saying. If you want better returns, you have to accept higher volatility. If you want lower volatility, the real risk you're running is not a loss of all your principal. It's running out of money, not having enough to maintain your quality of life, not having enough to go to the restaurants, not having enough to do the medical care you need, not having enough to get the medications you need. Not having enough is a bigger issue than having too much volatility. Think about it. It's not something that you really have to think a lot about. Really? It's an emotional thing. I don't like it when things go down, and I don't like the volatility. But in order to have the higher returns, you have to accept higher volatility. goes with the territory. It just goes with the territory. And that's where we are. Our focus, we have a passion for creating wealth for our clients. We accept the fact, and our clients accept the fact, that volatility is going to be part of getting higher returns. If you're listening to this podcast, you have to look at your portfolios. You have to look at your assets. You have to think about what you have and where you're going. Do you have enough that you're going to be able to have twice the outflow from your portfolio as you need right now? Are you going to have enough that you can maintain a time of inflation? We have a history, and history doesn't repeat, but that it rhymes. So we can look back in the 1960s and 1970s. In 1960, inflation time was at 1%. Just 1%. By 1966, it had kicked up to almost 5 to 6, and the Fed began to raise interest rates. William McChesney Martin was the chairman of the Fed at that time. He realized that with inflation taking off, what needed to happen is interest rates needed to rise. Classic. We just saw that in 2021 and 22. The Fed began to raise interest rates. And as that happened, it began to bring down the interest rates, or bring down inflation rate. Inflation rates began to curve down. And as that happened, Arthur Burns was appointed to be chairman of the board, and he continued to lower interest rates. And inflation began to take off again. It was too soon. It was too much, too soon. And add to that the oil crisis. OPEC increased the oil prices and did an embargo of oil. That shot inflation up again. We live in a precarious time right now, not dissimilar from the 60s and 70s. Remember, in the 1960s, there was a whole lot of money that poured into the economy because of the Great Society. We did Medicare at that time. First time we passed Medicare was in mid-60s. We had the Vietnam War going on, which required money. We had the Civil Rights Movement going on. All of that happening in the mid-60s, and all of that created wealth, created the government spending a lot of money into the economy. Think back where we were. 2008, we went through the Great Recession. The Fed and Treasury poured a lot of money into the economy. Then we had COVID, and the Fed and the government poured more money into the economy. All of that similar to what was happening in the 1960s. Not the same reason, but similar results. And similar results. Inflation took off. And the Fed began to raise interest rates. Are we through the inflationary period of time? The chances are no more than we were through it in the early 1970-71 time period. It was just setting up. And inflation is not something that just takes off overnight. It just creeps up. It just starts and it just continues year after year, month after month, day after day. Prices get higher and higher. And isn't that what we're seeing today? I was shocked at $74 a pound for crab. I was really shocked. $57 for king salmon. I don't go shopping very much, but those things are a couple things that I do go to the store and look at. Cherries. I saw a thing for Rainier cherries, $19 a pound. Bing cherries for a couple bucks a pound, but Rainier cherries for $19 a pound. It's incredible. It's incredible. Not only do we have the tariffs going on, we have a workforce where laborers are not showing up. Cherry pickers. I heard about a cherry orchard owner who expected to have 120 workers to harvest the cherries, pick the cherries, and only 20 showed up because the rest are worried about what's going on with ice. Cherries are going to go higher. A lot of tomatoes are being plowed under in Florida and in California. We're seeing oranges go away. We're seeing all those things. And that's just on the food side. But with the tariffs going on, it's going to be cars. It's going to be large materials. We're seeing all of that go on. And if you're not dealing with that, if you're not dealing with an inflation that's going to be double-digit inflation, if you're not planning on that, you could be caught really, really off guard. So what do you have to do? You have to look at a portfolio that grows significantly faster than the rate of inflation. And if inflation is 5 or 6 or 7%, your portfolio needs to grow at 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 or 12%. And do stocks work doing that? Some, being in the right stocks at the right time. But if you look back at what happened in the 1960s and 70s, the Dow hit 1,000 in 1966 and then dropped off 20%. Got back to 1,000, then dropped off 30%. Then got back to 1,000, then dropped off 40%. Then dropped off 20%, and finally passed through 1,000 16 years later. 16 years. For 16 years, the Dow couldn't get past 1,000. So just being in an index fund, just being in a general group of stocks, just doesn't work. You have to be in the right thing at the right time. It's important to be fully invested. The studies show that you do best being fully invested. But being fully invested is not just holding on to what you have. I had a neighbor who had a restaurant, pizza restaurant. And during a recession in the 90s, he said to me as we're talking, he said, "I'd rather be a car dealer than a restaurant owner." And I said, "Harris, why?" And he said, "Because car dealers, when somebody's going to buy a new car, their car's running out, and they're in a recessionary time, they may delay that purchase for 6 months or 9 months. They may do some repairs, but eventually they're going to buy that car." He said, in a restaurant, if you don't go out to eat tonight, that revenue never comes back. So having the right stocks is being in the right place at the right time. You know, if there were only 2 stocks in the world, during a recessionary time, we would be buying the car stock. And during good times, we'd be buying the restaurant stock. And would be completely in the car stock during bad times, completely in the restaurant stock in good times. Now that's an extreme example, but that illustrates what we need to do. We need to be in the right stocks at the right period of time, not an index that just spreads the everything across the order. That's going back to the 1960s, 1970 time period when the Dow couldn't get over 1,000 for 16 years. That is not going to get you out of inflationary period of time. If you have a question about your portfolio and how it's going to perform, send me a message here on LinkedIn, and I will get back to you and let you know. There's no charge for that, and you know that the reason I'm doing this, you know the reason why I'm looking at this. So, but I'm happy to give you an opinion. If you're going for a major surgery, wouldn't you ask for a second opinion? You're dealing with something very significant when you're dealing with your net worth. Isn't it worth having a second opinion? Contact me here on LinkedIn, and I will get back to you with my thoughts on what you should be doing.